I discovered my entire family was in witness protection, and our whole life was fabricated. So I Googled our real names and found out why. I was 19 when I found the documents hidden in Dad's office. I'd gone in looking for my birth certificate to apply for a passport, my first time traveling abroad for college. Instead of the simple folder I expected, I found a manila envelope marked Witsec Relocation, Confidential. Inside were IDs with our faces but different names. My parents weren't David and Linda Morrison. They were Anthony and Catherine Rossetti. My little brother wasn't cute, innocent Tyler. He was Marco. And I wasn't Emma Morrison, honor student and future teacher. I was Sophia Rossetti. The names felt foreign in my mouth, but something about them triggered a buried memory. Whispered arguments late at night. Dad checking locks obsessively. Mom's habit of scanning parking lots before getting out of the car. How we'd moved 3 times before I turned 10, always with the same explanation. Dad got a better job opportunity. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. Federal paperwork dated 15 years ago. New social security numbers. A relocation agreement signed by both parents. At the bottom, a case number and the name of a U.S. Marshal. The more I read, the more pieces clicked into place. Why we never talked about extended family. Why there were no baby photos of me or Tyler before age 4. Why Mom sometimes woke up screaming from nightmares she refused to discuss. Why Dad carried a gun in his briefcase, something I'd discovered years ago but never questioned. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep, then crept into the basement with my laptop. My heart pounded as I typed Anthony Rossetti into the search bar. Part of me hoped I'd find nothing, that this was all some elaborate mistake or misunderstanding. The results made my blood run cold. News articles from 2008 filled my screen. Headlines screamed about organized crime, racketeering, and a massive FBI investigation that brought down half of Chicago's crime families. Anthony Rossetti wasn't just mentioned. He was a key witness whose testimony had put away 12 people, including his own brother. I clicked on a photo from the Chicago Tribune. There was Dad, 15 years younger, walking into federal court flanked by U.S. Marshals. The caption read, "Star witness Anthony Rossetti arrives to testify against the Benedetti crime family." The article detailed how Dad had been the Benedetti family's accountant, managing their money laundering operations through a chain of restaurants. When the FBI raided their headquarters, they'd offered him a deal, testify against everyone, or spend 30 years in prison. But what made me physically sick was reading further down the page. Mom's maiden name had been Catherine Benedetti. She wasn't just married to the accountant, she was the boss's daughter. My father had betrayed his wife's own family to save himself. I searched for more information about the Benedetti family, and what I found made me understand why we'd been running for 15 years. The organization had tentacles reaching across 3 states: drug trafficking, illegal gambling, contract killings. And according to multiple news sources, they had a reputation for never forgetting betrayal. A 2010 article mentioned that 2 other witnesses from the same case had been found dead despite being in protective custody. One had his cover blown when he tried to contact his elderly mother. The other had been identified by a former associate at a grocery store in Phoenix. Their deaths weren't quick or clean. I kept searching until I found what I was dreading. A forum post from just 6 months ago on a crime enthusiast website. Whatever happened to Anthony Rossetti, the snitch who brought down the Benedettis? Someone should find that rat. The responses made my stomach churn. People posting theories about where Dad might be hiding. Someone had even uploaded an age progression photo showing what he might look like now. It was eerily accurate. Then I found the news article that changed everything. Vincent Benedetti released after serving reduced sentence. The date was 2 weeks ago. Vincent Benedetti was Uncle Vincent, Mom's brother, the man who taught me to ride a bike and snuck me extra dessert at family dinners. At least that's what my fragmented childhood memories told me. The article mentioned that he'd been a model prisoner, earning early release for good behavior. It quoted his lawyer saying that Vincent was looking forward to reconnecting with family and settling old scores in a legal manner. The phrasing sent chills down my spine. I cross-referenced the release date with our family's recent behavior. Dad's sudden insistence on updating our security system 3 weeks ago. Mom's new habit of varying her route to work. The way they both insisted Tyler and I check in more frequently when we were out. They knew. They'd known for weeks that our worst nightmare was walking free. I spent the next 3 hours researching everything I could find about Vincent Benedetti. Court records painted a picture of a man who'd built his empire through calculated violence. The FBI had connected him to at least 7 murders, though they'd only been able to prove 3. But the most disturbing discovery came when I found a recent interview he'd given to a local Chicago paper upon his release. "Family is everything," he'd said. "Blood is thicker than water, and some betrayals can never be forgiven or forgotten." When asked about his plans, he'd smiled and said, "I'm going to reconnect with everyone who matters to me." Some people think distance and time can erase the past. They're wrong. The journalist had pressed him about his brother-in-law's testimony. Vincent's response was chilling. Anthony made his choice. Now he has to live with the consequences. Him and his family. I realized I was crying, not just from fear, but from grief. Everything I believed about my life, my family, my identity, it was all smoke and mirrors. The loving extended family I'd mourned losing in childhood hadn't been lost to distance or death. They'd been lost to betrayal. But worse than that was the growing certainty that our time was running out. I searched deeper into our family history. Mom's family had run Benedetto's restaurant for 3 generations. It wasn't just a business, it was the center of their world. Sunday dinners with 30 relatives, weddings that lasted 3 days, baptisms where the entire neighborhood showed up. I found photos on the restaurant's old website. There was Mom at 16, helping in the kitchen. Dad at 18, awkward in a server's apron. Apparently he'd started working there to pay for college. And there was Uncle Vincent, always in the center of every photo, arm around whoever was nearest. That same smile I remembered from childhood. Reading between the lines of various news articles, I pieced together what had really happened. Dad hadn't started as a criminal. He'd been an accounting student who fell in love with the boss's daughter. Vincent had given him a job to help pay for school. But gradually, Dad had gotten pulled deeper into the family business, the real family business. By the time he realized what he was involved in, he was already guilty of money laundering on a massive scale. When the FBI closed in, they offered him a choice: cooperate or spend the rest of his life in prison. What they hadn't told him was that cooperation would mean destroying his wife's family and turning his children into permanent refugees. I found the court transcripts from Dad's testimony, page after page of him detailing financial crimes, describing meetings where violence was planned, naming names of people who trusted him. He'd worn a wire for 6 months before the arrests. He'd been recording his own family. The betrayal was comprehensive. He hadn't just testified about business operations. He'd given up Uncle Vincent's location when the man was trying to flee. He'd provided bank account information that led to asset seizures worth millions. He'd even testified about Mom's involvement in the money laundering, though she'd been granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. Reading those transcripts, I understood now why Mom sometimes flinched when Dad touched her, why she'd developed an obsession with true crime podcasts, why she'd homeschooled us for 3 years for better education, when really, she'd been terrified of sending us to public school. She hadn't just lost her family, she'd watched her husband destroy them. But what I found next made everything else seem trivial. A crime forum post from 3 days ago. Vincent B. spotted at O'Hare Airport. Looks like he's heading somewhere specific. The responses were from people who seemed to know exactly who Vincent B. was and why his travel plans mattered. About time. Rats need exterminating. Hope he finds what he's looking for. Some debts take 15 years to collect. I searched flight records, something I probably shouldn't have been able to access, but Tyler had taught me some questionable computer skills during his hacker phase. Vincent had flown from Chicago to Kansas City 2 days ago. He was only 3 hours away from us. My hands were shaking as I closed the laptop and crept back upstairs. I stood outside my parents' bedroom door, listening to Dad's restless tossing. Through the crack under the door, I could see light. He was awake, probably scrolling through news alerts on his phone, searching for any mention of Vincent's movements. I thought about Tyler, sleeping peacefully in his room, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire identity was fabricated. He'd been 4 when we entered protection. He had no memory of our real lives, our real family, our real selves. To him, we were the Morrisons, and we always had been. But I remembered. Fragments were coming back now with startling clarity. A grandmother who called me Little Sophie and let me help make pasta every Sunday. Uncle Vincent lifting me onto his shoulders at the restaurant, sneaking me tastes of sauce before dinner. Cousin Maria teaching me to braid friendship bracelets. A whole extended family who'd loved me completely and who now probably considered me dead, or worse, a traitor's daughter. I remembered the night everything changed. I'd been 4, maybe 5. Men in suits had come to our house. Mom was crying. Dad was packing frantically, throwing our belongings into garbage bags. Someone kept saying we had to leave right now, that people were coming for us. They told us it was a game, a fun adventure to a new place. For years, I'd believed that story, even when the nightmares started. Dreams of men in dark cars following us, of moms screaming at someone to leave us alone. Now I realized those weren't nightmares. They were memories. I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I confronted them at breakfast. Tyler had already left for school. Basketball practice started early on Fridays. I know, I said simply, placing printouts of the newspaper articles on the kitchen table. Mom's coffee cup clattered against her saucer. Dad went completely still. Emma, Mom started. Sophia, I corrected. My name is Sophia Rossetti, and I know exactly what you did. Dad closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked older than I'd ever seen him. How much do you know? He asked quietly. Everything. The testimony. Uncle Vincent. The fact that he's been out of prison for 2 weeks and is currently somewhere in Missouri. Mom's face went white. How could you possibly know that? I showed them the flight records and forum posts. People are tracking his movements. They're celebrating the fact that he's hunting us. Dad buried his face in his hands. Jesus Christ. We should have moved last week when Webb called. Webb? Marshall Webb, Mom explained. Our handler. She warned us about Vincent's release, but we thought we had more time. Why didn't you tell us? I demanded. Because Tyler's finally happy here, Mom said, tears starting. He has friends. He made varsity basketball. He has a girlfriend. And you're about to graduate. We thought maybe if we just kept our heads down. You thought what? That love conquers all? That family loyalty expires after 15 years? Dad's voice was bitter. Vincent spent every day in prison planning what he'd do to us when he got out. This isn't something we can run from forever. Then why do you keep trying? The question hung in the air between us. Dad looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not just the recognition that I wasn't a child anymore, but something deeper, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. What do you want from us, Sophia? He asked, using my real name for the first time in my memory. I want the truth, all of it, and then I want us to figure out how to end this. Mom started to protest, but Dad held up a hand. She's right, he said quietly. She deserves to know what she's running from. For the next hour, they told me everything. Dad had been 22 when he'd started working at Benedetto's. He'd been studying accounting at Northwestern, working nights and weekends to pay for school. Vincent had hired him initially for legitimate work. The restaurant did have real customers and real income. But gradually, Dad had been pulled into the family's other businesses. At first, it was just creative bookkeeping, making certain income streams look more legitimate than they were. Then it was moving money between accounts, creating paper trails that would confuse auditors. I told myself I was just helping a family business, Dad said. Vincent treated me like a son. Your mother and I were planning to get married. I thought I was part of something good. By the time Dad realized the full scope of what the Benedettis were involved in, he was already complicit in millions of dollars worth of money laundering. And Mom was pregnant with me. I wanted out, Dad said. But Vincent made it clear that people don't just leave the family. Ever. The FBI had been watching the Benedettis for years, building a case. When they finally moved, they arrested 17 people in coordinated raids. Dad was among them. They offered me a deal, Dad said. Cooperate fully and they'd protect my family. Refuse, and I'd spend 30 to 40 years in prison while Vincent and his people had free access to you and your mother. What choice did I have? He asked. And for the first time in my life, I heard my father sound broken. Mom's story was even more heartbreaking. She'd grown up believing her family's restaurant was just a restaurant. She'd known some of her relatives were involved in questionable activities, but the women in the family were kept deliberately ignorant of the details. I didn't find out the truth until after you were born, Mom said. Vincent sat me down and explained that your father was working for the family in ways that weren't exactly legal. He said it was normal, that all family businesses had arrangements like this. When the FBI raids happened, Mom's entire world collapsed overnight. Her husband was arrested. Her family was destroyed. Her father died of a heart attack 3 days after Vincent was sentenced. I had to choose, Mom said, crying now. Between my husband and my family, between your safety and my heritage. She'd chosen us. Do you regret it? I asked. Both parents looked at me in surprise. Do you regret choosing us over them? Dad was quiet for a long moment. I regret that the choice had to be made at all. I regret getting involved with people who made violence their business. I regret that Tyler and you have had to pay for my mistakes. He paused. But I don't regret keeping you alive. Mom nodded. We lost everything. Our families, our identities, our history. But we kept you and Tyler safe. That has to count for something. I looked at both of them. These people who'd sacrificed everything to protect us. Who'd given up their identities, their families, their entire existence to keep us breathing. But I also saw the people who'd robbed Tyler and me of our heritage, our culture, our right to know who we really were. What happens now? I asked. We pack tonight, Dad said. Marshall Webb has new identities ready. We'll be the Patterson family by next week. And then what? We do this again in another 15 years when one of Vincent's lieutenants gets released? We keep running forever? Mom wiped her eyes. What choice do we have? I looked at both of them, really looked at them, and realized they'd been asking themselves the same question for 15 years. There is another choice, I said slowly. They waited. We stopped running. Dad's face went white. Absolutely not. You don't understand what you're suggesting. I understand perfectly. Uncle Vincent wants you dead. He wants our whole family destroyed. Running just delays the inevitable and ruins our lives in the process. So what are you proposing? Mom asked. That we just wait here for him to find us? I'm proposing we find him first. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma, Sophia, Dad said carefully. Vincent isn't just some angry relative. He's a career criminal with resources and connections we can't even imagine. But he's also a 72-year-old man who just spent 15 years in prison, I countered. His organization is scattered. Most of his allies are dead or in prison themselves. And most importantly, he's angry, which means he's not thinking clearly. I pulled out my phone and showed them what I'd discovered that morning. He's staying at the Marriott downtown under his own name. He's not hiding because he thinks he's untouchable. He's been posting on social media for crying out loud. Look, I showed them Vincent's Facebook page, which he'd apparently created upon his release. Photos of him at the prison gates, a check-in at a Chicago restaurant, a post about visiting old friends and settling old business. This isn't a criminal mastermind anymore, I continued. This is a bitter old man who wants revenge more than he wants to be smart about getting it. Mom was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. What exactly are you suggesting we do? We contact Marshall Webb. We tell her we want to help set up a sting operation. Vincent wants Dad? Fine. Let's give him what he wants. With the FBI watching every move. Dad shook his head violently. I won't use my family as bait. We're already bait, I said. We've been bait for 15 years. The only difference is whether we're running scared or taking control of the situation. I pulled out my laptop and showed them more of what I'd discovered. Vincent made reservations at Benedetto's, the old family restaurant, for tomorrow night. Table for 4. He's planning to meet people there, probably associates who've been tracking us for him. Mom's face went completely pale. How do you know that? Because I called and pretended to be confirming the reservation. The hostess was very chatty about how exciting it was to have Mr. Vincent back after all these years. I looked at both of them. This is our chance. He's going to be in a public place, probably with minimal security because he thinks he's safe. If Marshall Webb sets up surveillance, no, Dad said firmly. I won't risk your lives for my mistakes. They're not just your mistakes anymore, I said quietly. The moment you decided to have children while living this lie, you made it our problem too. Tyler and I deserve the chance to live normal lives without looking over our shoulders. I stood up and went to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street. I've been thinking about this all night. What kind of life is Tyler going to have? He can't ever use social media freely. He can't pursue careers that require background checks. He can't form deep relationships because he can never tell anyone who he really is. I turned back to my parents. And what happens when one of us gets seriously injured and needs medical records we don't have? What happens when Tyler wants to get married and his bride's family does a background check? What happens when we have children and they ask about their grandparents? Mom was crying again, but she was also nodding slowly. She's right, she whispered. We can't keep doing this to them. Dad stared at us both, and I could see the exact moment he realized we weren't the helpless children he'd been protecting anymore. If we do this, he said finally, we do it properly. Full federal protection, professional surveillance, and if anything goes wrong, anything at all, we disappear forever. No arguments, no delays. I nodded. Agreed. He pulled out Marshall Webb's card. Apparently he'd been carrying it with him for weeks. I'll make the call, he said. 3 hours later, Marshall Patricia Webb was sitting in our living room, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with graying brown hair and the kind of alert eyes that suggested she'd seen too much. She wore a simple blue suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd spent years dealing with dangerous people. "This is highly irregular," she said for the fourth time. "Using protected witnesses as operational assets goes against every protocol we have." "But it could work," I insisted. "Vincent wants a meeting with Dad. We can give him one." Marshall Webb looked at Dad. "You understand what you're volunteering for? If Vincent suspects this is a setup, he won't just disappear. He'll escalate." Dad's voice was steady. "I've been running from this man for 15 years. I'm tired of being afraid. And your children? Are you willing to risk their lives for closure?" "We're willing to risk our lives for freedom," I answered before Dad could respond. "This isn't about revenge. It's about ending this cycle so Tyler and I can have real futures." Marshall Webb studied all of us for a long moment. I could see her weighing risks, calculating odds, probably thinking about how she'd explain this to her superiors if things went wrong. "If we do this," she said finally, "it's by federal rules. Professional agents, controlled environment, multiple backup plans. You don't freelance, you don't improvise. You follow instructions exactly as given." We all nodded. "And if Vincent brings backup we're not prepared for, or if the situation becomes unsafe in any way, we abort immediately. You disappear that night and you never surface as the Morrison family again." "Understood," Dad said. Marshall Webb made several phone calls, speaking in careful code with people whose names I'd probably never know. While she talked, I thought about Tyler, still at school, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. When she hung up from the last call, her expression was grim. "We're going to do this," she said, "but not at the restaurant. Too many civilians, too many variables. We're going to arrange a different meeting location." She pulled out a tablet and showed us photos of a warehouse district across town. Industrial area, mostly abandoned after 6 p.m. We can control access points, position agents, and ensure no innocent bystanders get caught in crossfire if things go wrong. "How do we get Vincent to agree to meet there instead of the restaurant?" I asked. "We're going to tell him Dad wants to surrender himself in exchange for leaving the rest of the family alone," Marshall Webb said. "It's exactly the kind of dramatic gesture Vincent's ego would demand." She showed us psychological profiles the FBI had developed on Vincent during his incarceration. The man was driven by pride, by the need to feel powerful and respected. Having Anthony Rossetti beg for his family's lives would be irresistible to him. "Men like Vincent need to feel like they've won," Marshall Webb explained. "They need their enemies to acknowledge defeat publicly. It's not enough to just kill someone. They need to break them first." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Dad would call Vincent directly, a number Marshall Webb's team had obtained through surveillance, and request a meeting. He'd claim that 15 years of running had broken him, that he wanted to face the consequences of his betrayal like a man. "You'll tell him you're tired of looking over your shoulder," Marshall Webb instructed Dad, "that you want to make a deal. Your life in exchange for leaving Catherine, Sophia, and Marco alone. Will he believe that?" Mom asked. "He'll want to believe it," Marshall Webb said. "Vincent spent 15 years fantasizing about this moment. The chance to have his brother-in-law grovel for mercy? He'll take that meeting." We spent the rest of the afternoon rehearsing exactly what Dad would say. Every word was scripted, every possible response anticipated. Marshall Webb's team had studied Vincent's speech patterns, his psychological triggers, his ego weaknesses. "Remember," she told Dad, "you're a broken man who's run out of options. You're not being brave, you're being desperate. That's what Vincent wants to see." When Tyler came home from school, we told him Dad was working on a special project that required some security consultations. He was too distracted by basketball playoffs and an upcoming dance to pay much attention, but I caught him looking at me strangely a few times. "Are you okay?" he asked me while we were making dinner. "You seem weird today." "Just stressed about college applications," I lied. He nodded, accepting the explanation easily. At 14, he still believed that teenage anxiety was the worst thing in the world. That evening, Dad made the call. We all gathered around the kitchen table, with Marshall Webb and 2 other agents listening on monitoring equipment. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the microphones would pick it up. Dad dialed the number with steady hands. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Yeah? Vincent? It's Tony." A long pause. When Vincent spoke again, his voice was soft and dangerous. Well, Anthony Rossetti. I was wondering when you'd call. "I want to meet," Dad said, following the script perfectly. "Just you and me. We need to talk." "Oh, we're going to talk, Tony. We're going to have a very long conversation about family loyalty." "I know what I did was wrong," Dad said, and the pain in his voice wasn't entirely acting. "I've spent 15 years regretting it. But my family, they don't deserve to pay for my choices." Vincent laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Your family? You mean my sister and her children? The niece and nephew I haven't seen since they were babies because their father decided to become a rat? I'll make it right," Dad said. "Whatever you want from me, I'll give you. Just leave Catherine and the kids alone." Another pause. I could almost hear Vincent's mind working, savoring the moment. "You know what, Tony? I think we should meet. But not at some public place where you might have friends waiting. Somewhere private. Somewhere we can really talk." "Name the place," Dad said. Vincent gave him an address. The warehouse district Marshall Webb had already prepared. "Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. Come alone, and come ready to make things right." "I'll be there," Dad said. "You better be. Because if you don't show, I'm going to pay a visit to that nice house on Maple Street where Catherine's been living. And I'm going to have a long conversation with my nephew about what happens to traitors' children." The line went dead. Marshall Webb was already on her radio, coordinating with her team. "Target confirmed for tomorrow 9 p.m. All units prepare for operation." I looked at Dad, who was staring at the phone like it might explode. "He knows where we live," Mom whispered. "He's known for weeks," Marshall Webb said. "Vincent's just been playing with you, waiting for the right moment. This call gives us the advantage. Now we control when and where the confrontation happens." That night, our house was transformed into a federal command center. Agents installed monitoring equipment, ran communication checks, and briefed Dad on exactly what to say and do during the meeting. Meanwhile, Tyler remained completely oblivious. We told him the agents were security consultants helping Dad with a work project. He bought the story completely, even asking one of the agents about FBI recruitment requirements for a school project. Kid's got good instincts, the agent told me later. He'd make a good federal agent himself someday. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thursday night, Marshall Webb pulled me aside. Last chance to change your mind, she said. Once this starts, there's no going back. If things go wrong tomorrow night, your family might have to disappear permanently. New names, new faces, no contact with anyone from your current life. I know, I said, but we can't keep living like this. Tyler deserves to know who he really is. We all do, she nodded. Your father's lucky to have you. No, I said, watching Dad rehearse his lines with the agents for the dozenth time. We're lucky to have each other. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable rain, the kind of weather that made everything seem more ominous, more final. At 7 p.m., Tyler left for the school dance. I hugged him goodbye, memorizing the feel of it in case it was the last time I'd see him as Emma Morrison's little brother. Have fun, I told him. You're being weird again, he said, but he was grinning. Must be a girl thing. If only he knew. Dad kissed Mom goodbye at 8:30 p.m., and for a moment, I saw them as Anthony and Catherine Rossetti, young people in love who'd made terrible choices and spent 15 years paying for them. I love you, Mom whispered. I love you too, he replied. All of this, everything we've been through, it was worth it to keep you and the kids safe. I hugged him at the door. Be careful, Dad. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since I'd discovered the truth. I will. And when this is over, we're going to have a very long conversation about our real family history, the good parts you never got to know. 2 FBI vehicles followed Dad to the warehouse district, maintaining careful distance. Marshall Webb and her team were already in position, with agents disguised as homeless people, maintenance workers, and late-shift employees. Mom and I waited at home, listening to radio chatter from the command post they'd set up in our garage. At 8:47 p.m., Vincent arrived at the warehouse. He wasn't alone. 3 vehicles, came the report over the radio. Target plus 5 associates, all appear armed. My heart sank. This wasn't the small, manageable operation we'd planned for. Abort? Came a voice over the radio. Negative, Marshall Webb's voice responded. We proceed. All units maintain position. At 9:02 p.m., Dad's car pulled into the warehouse parking lot. Lone Wolf is in position, came the report. Lone Wolf was Dad's code name. For the next 20 minutes, we listened to Vincent and Dad's conversation through the wire Dad was wearing. Every word was clear, recorded for posterity and legal proceedings. Vincent had spent those 20 minutes detailing exactly what he'd planned to do to our family, how he'd tracked us through social media posts from Tyler's basketball games, how he'd been paying informants to watch for any sign of the Rossetti family in small towns across the Midwest. I'm a patient man, Tony, Vincent's voice said through the radio speakers. I can wait decades if I have to, but nobody betrays the Benedetti family and lives to enjoy it. Dad's voice was steady despite everything. My family had nothing to do with my choices, Vincent. They were children. They're Rosettis, Vincent replied. That's enough. Then Vincent made his fatal mistake. You know what I'm going to do, Tony? I'm going to kill you first so you can't warn them. Then I'm going to visit Catherine. I'm going to make her watch while I kill Marco, slowly so she understands what betrayal costs. And then I'm going to keep Sophia alive long enough to make her pay for being your daughter. That was the signal Marshall Webb had been waiting for. All units go, came her voice over the radio. The next few minutes were chaos. Shouting voices, the sound of vehicles moving, Vincent screaming at his associates to kill the rat, then gunshots. Mom grabbed my hand so tightly I thought she might break bones. We listened to the radio chatter, trying to piece together what was happening. Target down, Lone Wolf secure, 2 suspects in custody, 1 fled on foot, medical needed at staging area 2. That last transmission made my blood freeze. Dad? Mom whispered to the radio, as if it could hear her. 20 minutes later, Marshall Webb's voice came through clearly. All clear, operation successful, Lone Wolf is safe. We cried, both of us clutching each other in our kitchen while federal agents dismantled their equipment around us. Dad came home an hour later, shaken, but unharmed. Vincent was dead, killed in the shootout when he'd pulled a gun on federal agents. 3 of his associates were in custody. 2 others had fled but were being tracked by FBI teams across 3 states. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Vincent's revenge plan. He'd spent years in prison building a network of contacts, offering payment to anyone who could provide information about the Rossetti family's location. He'd been planning to torture Dad's entire family before killing them, then display their bodies as a warning to anyone else who might consider betraying organized crime families. 6 months later, we sat in a federal courthouse as Vincent's surviving associates were sentenced for conspiracy to commit murder, violation of federal witness protection laws, and a dozen other felonies. The trial revealed details that made our 15 years of running seem like a picnic compared to what Vincent had actually been planning. After the sentencing, Marshall Webb handed us a choice we'd never expected to have. You can stay in witness protection as the Morrison family, she said. Vincent said, but there might be others who still hold grudges. Or you can reclaim your real identities. The threat assessment shows minimal ongoing risk. The decision wasn't as easy as I'd expected. Tyler, who'd learned the truth after Vincent's death, was struggling with the revelation that his entire identity had been fabricated. He'd gone through weeks of counseling, trying to process the fact that he was Marco Rossetti, not Tyler Morrison. I don't know how to be Marco, he'd told me one night. Tyler Morrison plays basketball and gets good grades and has normal problems. Marco Rossetti is the son of a snitch whose uncle tried to kill his family. Which one am I supposed to be? Mom was torn between the life she'd built and the life she'd lost. She'd started having dreams about her father, who died while we were in hiding. Dreams where he forgave her for choosing Dad over the family. Dreams where she got to say goodbye. Dad wanted whatever would make us happiest, but I could see the guilt eating at him. He'd saved our lives, but at the cost of our heritage, our culture, our connection to extended family who might not even know we were still alive. I wanted our real names back, but more than that, I wanted Tyler to have the choice to decide who he wanted to be. In the end, we compromised. We kept our current lives but reclaimed our heritage. Tyler Morrison Rossetti, David Morrison Rossetti, Linda Morrison Rossetti, and me, Emma Morrison Rossetti. It was clunky, but it felt honest. We moved back to Chicago 6 months ago, not to our old neighborhood, too many painful memories, but to a small apartment near the lake where we could start fresh as our real selves. I enrolled in college under my real name. Tyler joined a new basketball team where he could be honest about his background. Mom and Dad started marriage counseling to work through 15 years of forced intimacy under assumed identities. The transition wasn't easy. We had to relearn how to be ourselves after spending so many years being other people. Simple things like signing our names or introducing ourselves to new people required conscious thought. But slowly, we began to remember who we'd been before we became the Morrisons. Mom started cooking Italian food again. Recipes her mother had taught her that she'd avoided for 15 years because they reminded her of what she'd lost. The smell of garlic and basil in our kitchen made her cry the first few times, but they were good tears. Dad reached out to his surviving relatives, cousins and aunts who'd had no idea what had happened to Anthony Rossetti and his family. Some wanted nothing to do with us, still angry about his testimony, but others welcomed us back with open arms, grateful to learn we were alive. Tyler struggled the most with the adjustment. He'd spent 10 years building Tyler Morrison's personality, and discovering that it was all artificial left him feeling hollow. He went through a phase where he insisted everyone call him Marco, then switched back to Tyler, then settled on Tyler Marco, using his middle name as a bridge between his identities. I don't know if I'm Italian or American or both or neither, he told our counselor during one family session. I don't know if I like basketball because I really like it or because Tyler Morrison was supposed to like it. It took months of therapy for him to understand that interests don't have ethnicities, that the person he'd become was real even if his name had been fake. Last week, I visited Benedetto's restaurant. It's under new management now, a young couple who bought it from the state after the Benedetti assets were seized. They've transformed it into a modern Italian fusion place, serving creative dishes alongside traditional ones. But they kept some of the old family photos on the walls, treating them as historical artifacts rather than personal memories. I found a picture of myself as a toddler, sitting on Uncle Vincent's lap at what must have been a Christmas celebration. We're both smiling. He's holding me like I'm precious to him, like I'm the most important thing in his world. Looking at that photo, I understood something I'd never grasped before. Vincent wasn't evil because he was born that way. He'd loved me once. He'd been part of a family that laughed together and celebrated together and protected each other. But somewhere along the way, loyalty became obsession, protection became control, love became possession. The same qualities that make families strong can destroy them if they're taken too far. I asked the restaurant owners if I could have a copy of the photo. They said yes, probably thinking I was just a customer who found the historical images interesting. Now it sits on my desk at home, next to a recent photo of our reconstructed family. In the old picture, I'm laughing on Vincent's lap, completely trusting and innocent. In the new picture, I'm standing between my parents and Tyler, all of us smiling, but with eyes that have seen too much. The contrast tells the whole story of who we were, who we became, and who we're trying to be now. Tyler asked me once whether I regretted discovering the truth about our family. I told him no, but that wasn't entirely honest. I regret that we lost 15 years of being ourselves. I regret that Tyler never got to know our grandmother before she died of heartbreak over losing her family. I regret that we missed weddings and graduations and ordinary family moments that could have been beautiful instead of dangerous. But I don't regret that Dad chose our safety over his family's loyalty. I don't regret that we got the chance to become people instead of just survivors. And I don't regret learning that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is run away, as long as you eventually find the strength to stop running and reclaim your life. These days, when people ask about our unusual hyphenated last name, I tell them it's complicated. But the truth is, family is always complicated. Some families are complicated because of divorce, or adoption, or blended households. Our family is complicated because we had to choose between love and loyalty, between heritage and survival, between the people we were born to be and the people we needed to become. It's just that some complications are worth 15 years of false identities and federal protection, and others are worth a lifetime of figuring out who you really are underneath all the lies you've been told, and telling yourself about who you're supposed to be. The funny thing is, I'm more myself now than I ever was as either Emma Morrison or the child I was before we went into hiding. Maybe that's because I finally understand that identity isn't just about names or heritage or family history. It's about the choices you make when everything you thought you knew turns out to be wrong. It's about who you decide to be when you discover that who you've been was never really you at all.